Summertime. I hope that all of you, I can see that we've got quite a few joining us right now with our collaborative conference video session on stat development. I hope that you've had a great summer so far. We don't have students, which is awesome, but it's also an opportunity for us to learn and to continue in our educational process of learning as much as we can to better educate our students. And so in this staff development, we're going to be going over quality teaching. What is quality teaching? We're going to go through the use of backwards design lesson plans so that we can make sure that we get to that quality level and differentiated instruction. I feel that when we have great lesson plans that begin with the end in mind, and we have differentiated instruction where we're getting to each individual student and trying to engage each individual student, then we've got a pretty great classroom environment. We've got a quality classroom environment. And so let's get into our session today. Backwards design lesson plans. The main idea of backwards design lesson plans, as I mentioned earlier, is to teach and plan towards the end goal or learning point. So we want to make sure that we are looking at what our results want to be. As a teacher, what do I want my students to learn? And that's where we're going to start. So we begin at the end. Planning starts with a focus on the end product. If teachers focus on the desired learning, then the appropriate teaching methods will follow. It makes no sense to me to start planning and then, oh, there's what my desired result wants to be. I would rather start with what my desired result is and then plan from there. And so whether that's a TEK, whether that's a concept, whether that's a critical thinking skill, start with that, and then your activities and teaching methods will follow. And that's what we're going to learn today. So let's get into it. The first thing is we want to identify what the desired results are. And so what do you want your students to know? What do you want them to understand? And what do you want them to accomplish? So those are our desired results. We're beginning with that on our lesson plans. Okay? And then we get into what we must determine what the prerequisite skills are. What are needed to obtain our results. So, for example, if we're teaching a 6th grade math class and we know that measurement is going to be involved and they're going to have a ruler to measure an object or something, we want to make sure that they already are confident with a ruler in their hand and they know what 3 3/8 inches is, and they have no fear of that device, no fear of that ruler. That would be a prerequisite that we want to make sure that they've already obtained. So, continuing with identifying continuing with these desired results. What concepts are going to prove difficult for these students? We want to make sure that we give our students the most confidence possible. We don't want to put them in front of an assessment or put them in front of a project or put them in front of their peers and not have adequately prepared them. So when we're going through our design, when we're looking at our desired results, we know what might prove difficult for some students. And so we want to make sure that we star those, and when we get to that point, we make sure that we have activities that are going to give them that confidence. Continuing with that, we want to engage our students. That's the key, is engaging our students. We want to have good content. We want to be engaging with our students. We want them to be excited about the learning process. And so then we identify what evidence of learning we're going to have. We have to ask ourselves, how do I know if students have achieved the desired results? Am I going to use an assessment tool? Am I going to use a project? Am I going to have them test their critical thinking skills in front of the class as far as reteaching? So those are the evidence of learning that we're going to have to think of when we're planning out our lesson plan. And so we get into the actual assessment. Is it going to be project-based? Is it going to be question-based in the form of a STAR-type test? Those are things that we have to think about when we're planning our lessons out. So then we get into, after we've done all of that, we start designing the instructional plan. Design activities that cause the desired result to occur. This is when we get into the activities. Is it going to be a project? Is it going to be collaborative with other students? What are those activities going to be? And so we have to ask ourselves the key questions when we're designing this process. What is worthy and requiring understanding? What is evidence of understanding? What learning experiences and teaching promote understanding, promote the interest involved, and the excellence? So those are the key design questions when we're planning out our instructional design. That's what we have to ask ourselves. And so let's look at an example here. We've got a TEK 6.1a. The student uses mathematical processes to acquire and demonstrate mathematical understanding. The student is expected to apply mathematics to problems arising in everyday life, society, and the workplace. So this is our desired result. This is the end product. We want our students to be able to master this TEK. So that's where we start with our lesson plan, is our desired result. Then we look into the evidence of learning. We have an assessment tool here from a STAR test where this question is: Holly bought a magazine subscription for a year. She paid $27. Holly wanted to find the price, P, of the subscription each month. So she created the model shown to help find this price. What was the price of the subscription each month? This question comes from that TEK that we just saw. So we want to make sure our students are confident when it comes to answering this question. So what are we going to do? We know that that is a desired result. We know that's an evidence of learning. So what activities are we going to do to give our students the confidence that when they sit down in front of an assessment like this, they know what the process is as far as answering that question? So one of the activities that we can use for identifying evidence of learning is a project, class projects. Using fake money, we could simulate real-life scenarios by giving each student a job with an income, and each student, after performing their job, could purchase something from the price chest. Now, I'm going to use fake money. You can use real money if you want to, but I'm going to use some fake money there. But each student could rotate being the teller. Now, what this is going to do is going to reinforce those skills that are prerequisite to a problem that we just saw. By each student rotating being the teller, we're engaging them because they're going to be excited about handling money, giving correct change, making sure that they have the correct change. And so they're going to be counting it. All of that's reinforcing the prerequisite skills for a problem like we just saw. So in planning the instruction, we begin the process of choosing the teaching methods and resource materials. We need to know what is going to be used in this process. Different resources that we're going to have. Do we need to get some fake money? Do we need to go to the dollar store and get stuff for our prize chest? And then the teaching methods. This gets into our differentiated instruction that we're going to be talking about, and making sure that we are getting to each individual student. So then we're going to get into our differentiated instruction right now. First, we're going to talk about what quality teaching is. Okay, so we've all seen it before. We've hopefully observed some classrooms, whether it was in the mentorship process or whether it was us just simply going and wanting to improve on our own teaching. So we went to a high-quality teacher and went into their classroom. We saw engaged students. We saw an engaged teacher. And when we see engaged students and an engaged teacher, that's when we start to see great learning happening. And so that's quality teaching. And so the specific definition that I've got is quality teaching clearly engages all students in the learning process, creates intellectually ambitious tasks, and uses a variety of teaching strategies such as grouping, group discussions, probing, modeling, and then student-led teaching. This classroom that was just explained, this quality teaching definition, would be an amazing classroom to experience. And so that's what we're trying to get, is for you to grow in your confidence of being able to do this in your own classroom. We saw the process of designing a lesson plan with backwards designed lessons. Okay, It's a fine detail, but this right here is where students really start to learn. The critical thinking skills really start to excel is when we see classrooms like this. So, one of the ways we can do this is through differentiated instruction. So what is differentiated instruction? It is based off, I've got the definition based off the NYU Steinhardt School of Culture, where they wrote in the culturally responsive differentiated instructional strategies that differentiated instruction is an approach to teaching and learning for students with different abilities in the same classroom. So again, we want to make sure we're getting to each individual student. And so my next slide says we need to treat them as individual students, not as a group of students. We want to make sure that we don't view it as a class. I'm teaching a class. Instead, I'm teaching individuals. So the best way I see this is making sure that you're building those relationships with each individual student. What makes each individual student tick? What motivates them? What piques their interest? When I take a knee beside their desk and I get that one-on-one time with them, is that what it takes for that individual student? Are they more visual? Are they more audible in their learning? Or do they have to have hands-on in order to make sure that they take ownership in it and they learn it? Those are the keys in the differentiated instruction before we really get into it. But many teachers that have incorporated differentiated instruction in their classrooms have stated that one of the things that was important was to stop looking at class as a group and to start looking at them as individuals and realizing that it wasn't even possible that the same experience was happening for all of those kids when something happened in the classroom. It doesn't happen the same way for all students. So examples of use. So let's look at an Algebra 1 class. If we had a TEK in Algebra 1 class where we had to write and solve equations involving direct variation. So we could use small group instruction. A teacher who's trying to teach their students to master this TEK could split students up into their small groups, however they wanted to group up into small groups, where they have a set of application problems over direct variation. And the teacher provided manipulatives at each individual group. And each group has a real-world problem set in front of them on direct variation. And they have their algebra tiles. So the group is going to use these algebra tiles to solve this real-world problem. And then they're going to rotate to each group to make sure they get all problems in the circle. That would be an example of using differentiated instruction in an Algebra 1 classroom. All right, so let's speed up here a little bit. We're kind of running short on our time. In a 6th grade science classroom, we could identify advantages and limitations of models such as size, scale, properties, materials, and could have several stations set up with different models of size, shape, property, and with different materials, and have students rotate from station to station, cataloging their opinions of each station. All right, so then let's look at a history classroom. If we have a U.S. history teacher wanting to assure themselves of the material that was learned during World War II, and this specific TEK is identifying reasons for U.S. involvement in World War II, including Italian, German, and Japanese dictatorships and their aggression, especially the attack on Pearl Harbor. We could ask our students to create a PowerPoint presentation showing the reasons, citing the sources, and attaching the articles from that time period showing the rationale for the United States involvement. All right, and then lastly, the elementary versus the high school debate. I feel strongly about this type of instruction and training up students in the ways of your teaching. You can definitely use it in an elementary classroom as well as a high school classroom. One thing that we can see is that if I'm going to do lots of small group activities or teach through rotating stations, then I'm going to have to go through my students. I'm going to have to teach them the proper expectations for this. All right, so I had one question. How do you adapt to students coming to class late when differentiated instruction is already taking place? I simply let the students get them involved with that.